Hi, everybody. My name is Jason Barrett. So, one of the interesting things that we really are starting to see one, there's a lot of competition. Again, this show probably showing that better than ever. Uh, Consumers are definitely starting to wise up. I think it's a little hard to go to market with my great grandpappy had a still and he had a secret recipe. And I know it says distilled in Indiana, but don't pay no attention to the back of the label. Most consumers at this point have picked up on that. And therefore, they're calling out brands that are not being authentic. And there's no, you're trying to build trust, you're trying to build a relationship, whether that be with your distribution partner, your retail partner, or the consumer. Once that trust is broken, it's almost impossible to get it back. And I think consumers are more comfortable with alternative route to market. I think it's fine to say, listen, we partnered with a great distillery, we blended some great bourbon, here's how it came to be. It doesn't have to be the very prototypical, again, my great grandpappy was a moonshiner in Prohibition. Haven't we heard that before? And then finally, folks are increasingly going online to get that first engagement. So they're, another interesting way to think about this, if we're putting a $50 bottle of bourbon on the shelf and the average consumer up my way makes a little under $30 an hour, I'm asking for 2 hours of their time, 2 hours of their life after taxes to buy that bottle. It's got to be twice as good as Jack Daniel's because it's twice as expensive. That's a big ask and a big responsibility, and it's on us to explain that to people. And we're finding that that the digital realm is the best way to make those introductions, get that story told, connect with the right consumers. I mean, one of the challenges with billboards, you get everybody that drives by. But the nice part about a digital strategy, you can actually go after people that have similar likes, similar personas. There's a reason that they are going to connect with your brand. As we were talking about earlier, I mean, again, you're just constantly telling the message, you're constantly trying to reinforce that brand, and you're trying to have it be very consistent. So if your brand packaging doesn't match your collateral, doesn't match your social media tone or tenor, are you a funny brand or are you a serious brand? Are you celebrating World Whiskey Day or are you sticking to more important things? You kind of have to have that persona, and especially that's important as you start to have a bigger staff or as you start to transition from staff member to staff member. If you were to pull all of the tweets of Black Button, I bet you could figure out down to the month when we've had a different social media manager. Because even though we work very hard to have a consistent message, that tone and tenor shifts a little bit each time we transition through staff. We believe, again, that it's really important to be authentic. So if there are parts of the process that are either incongruent with the brand or that customers could want to pick at, you really, I'm not saying you have to go over in depth into how the sausage is made, but you can't hide from it anymore. Most people are going to figure it out. So, again, we often are battling the question of, well, all bourbon has to come from Kentucky. That's not the case anymore. And we've been making bourbon in New York for 12 years. Almost every state makes bourbon. So you can try to educate consumers. I've also learned that particular one, if they're stuck on that, we're unlikely to sway them. That's probably just not our consumer. So how do you build that brand story? Again, a lot of this is work that needs to be done before you go to market and preferably is really written out. How much of it is about the founder? How much of it is about your core values? What is your mission? The mission for Black Button is to take great New York grown ingredients and turn it into great New York grown spirits. We have occasionally wavered from that. We made rum once. A, it was difficult to make, and B, we realized it didn't really align with our mission. We have actually grown sugarcane in upstate New York. It got about yay high. Didn't work. But we tried to bring the rum back into mission. Ultimately, it didn't work. If that's our mission, we can't have a rum. So what is that brand promise? Again, for us, it's about delivering high-quality spirits at an affordable price that are grown in New York. And as you're writing all these things out, using them as part of your training, using it as part of even your recruiting. We need to hire staff members that this is what they want to do. Because at the end of the day, this is going to be hard. It's going to be a long road. And if they're not in it with us for the mission, it probably doesn't pay well enough to convince them to do it, especially on the craft side, although we try to pay a fair wage. And then obviously one of the other questions, how much are you leaning into those milestones or those accomplishments? There is nothing like winning that first gold medal. There is nothing like celebrating that achievement, especially because when you're 6 months in and you've been doing all this hard work and nothing's going right, there's nothing like having that validation. And it's important to celebrate those milestones and those wins. But you also have to recognize that most of the brands here are going to win a gold medal at some point. Consumers at this point really do expect a high quality product. So I do know some people that kind of over-index on, hey, we have 100 awards. That's great. But Buffalo Trace can always buy more of them than you can. So you just have to decide. And again, different milestones or achievements may resonate with consumers in a different way. You know, if Dale DeGroff gives a really great quote that your whiskey is transcendent for the Manhattan, people seem to know his name, you may want to run with that particular accomplishment. So positioning your brand, again, somewhat similar to what we were talking about earlier, and again, I imagine you will hear beforehand, you really need that unique selling presence and that why. Why is your product going to stand out? Why should a consumer buy your product over somebody else's? So again, for us, there are lots of bourbons on the market. There are very few that are made in New York, 100% pot distilled, and grain to glass. If those are important to you, if you want to know where your whiskey comes from and you want it to be local, we're a great fit. If you want $29 a liter bourbon from Kentucky, I actually have several I can recommend. And since we're not in a competitive situation, I'd be happy to do so. Although when I get asked in liquor stores about other people's products, I'm a little less helpful. So that positioning strategy, again, it's really looking at who is that target audience, how are you going to explain that point of difference, and how do you get them, again, to join your tribe or join your mission? Because at the end of the day, people really do want to get involved in something. It's why wine clubs exist. People create an emotional connection with that winery. They had a great time at that tasting room, and all of a sudden they want to remember that every time they open a bottle and share it with their friends. And unique stories really do help. I ended up in Bordeaux, France. I ended up in a store where they carried wine that was made by nuns who had taken a vow of silence. I just find that to be really interesting. I have no idea if it makes the wine better. But every person that comes to my house and I crack open, hey, I went to Bordeaux, and this is wine that's made by silent nuns. That's how they got me. I hope it's true. It'd be very rude to be lying about nuns, but it makes a good story. Also, I don't read French, so I have no idea what the label says. But again, it connected that one more out of novelty. Digital marketing, again, is what we find allows you to really just continue to A/B test and drill down on that target market. There are 1.2 million people in Rochester. If I spread my money evenly across them, I can't make an impact. So instead, I need the people that go to the farmers markets, that are concerned about organic, that are buying, fair trade coffee or locally grown and other things. And you can continue to neck down your ad spend through these items and create like-minded audiences so that your limited dollars will go farther. We also have taken a fairly aggressive approach to finding unusual ways to advertise. If you ever find yourself in Rochester, New York, and you're driving down our main highway, you will come across a building that has my logo on it. But that's not my distillery. But we managed to get our logo on a building that's right on the side of the highway, and it's close enough. And we, find quite a bit of just awareness value to that sign. However, there are billboards on both sides of that building, and you could not convince me that that was a good use of my marketing dollars, even though it would do the same things. It would just be too expensive. So the volume, the size of your budget, the size of your plan, and the ability to execute is going to have a lot to do with how you're going to go to market. If you've got a very large war chest, launching in multiple states with many staff members, with professionally designed collateral, all makes a lot of sense. That wasn't the position I was in, So we started out just literally selling at our local farmers market, then added our tasting room. And then we're actually somewhat unique. We self-distribute in upstate New York. We work directly with the liquor stores. This has been a very slow and methodical route to market, but it has also been very cost effective. So I think it's important for folks not to get out over their skis. And you've really got to be watching for the signals along the way. And what I have found so interesting over the years, this really is 50 different markets. I've got friends in Virginia that deal with the Virginia ABC, and friends in North Carolina that deal with the North Carolina ABC, and friends down in Texas that deal with the chain stores. Those are 4 very different routes to market. And if you don't understand them, it's almost impossible for you to be successful because someone else is spending their entire day trying to survive and excel in that system. So if you're in a control state, win your control state. If you're in an open state, win your open state. But the next state you open is a whole new battleground. And you really want to understand that one before you dump a lot of money into it. So for us, is your brand story authentic? Do you have clear positioning? Are you able to be digitally effective with people? And is your route to market strategy worked out for your individual area? Again, this works well for New York. It would not work in Virginia. Luckily, I live in New York. And then we just sign off with cheers on just about everything. So thank you very much, and I will turn it over to Mark.